Facebook now. Peace, family. Today is Sunday, March 5th, 2017. My name is Brother Jawanzaa, and I'll be your host for today's Sunday session. Just checking in a little early, make sure we have all the technical things working in our favor before we start the conference call. It's about 6:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we're just logging on in. Hope everybody's doing well today. Looks like we got one viewer in on Facebook Live. Mention your name, where you from. 2 viewers. What's up, y'all? Come on in. It's all family. It's all love here. I hope that you all had a beautiful, blacktastic Black History Month last month. Definitely want to keep in mind that our history is not just 28 days or 29 days if it's a leap year, but every day, right? So happy Black History Year, y'all. We're going to keep it on rolling. Throughout this week, kind of talk about some daily Black History facts. On March 2nd, Howard University started classes in 1867, March 2nd. So shout out to all the Bison alums out there, HU. On Tuesday, March 3rd, Texas Southern University opened in 1947. So shout out to Texas Southern alums out there. South Carolina State was established on March 4th, 1896. Bringing us up till today, Crispus, our ancestor Crispus Attucks, was killed in the Boston Massacre, making the start of the American Revolution in 1770. So those are your daily Black History facts of March. Looks like we got some callers that just called in on the line. Mention your name and where you from.
Hey, this is Dante from Hampton, Virginia.
Peace, Brother Dante. What's good with you, King?
Not much. Just chilling.
Bet. Appreciate you joining the call this evening. I was just kind of spitting some daily Black History facts. Just from the week from March 1st all the way up till today, because our Black History is more than just 28 or 29 days. We celebrate every day. You feel me, bro?
Definitely.
We got Montrell Marshall on the call on Facebook Live. He's one of definitely the loyalists on the Facebook Live family. Shout out to Montrell out there in Oak Cliff, Texas. What's good out there, man? What's the weather like? I wish I was out there in Oak Cliff. It looks like is Sherman on the line? I see a Dayton area code. Sherman, you there, King?
Yes, sir. How are you?
I'm well. How are you this evening, bro?
Okay, so you can't get on here and not be known, huh?
I'm gonna call you out, Brother Sherman. No, I'm glad that you got on the call. You and Dante, y'all are definitely one of the ones that continue to hold the line on the call. So I definitely appreciate the participation. It goes a long way, and what we're doing here, and it also allows me to give you all a shout out towards the end of the call as well. I definitely love shouting out my people that happen to make the call and everything. So that's what's up.
Thank you.
We also got Donna Moody on Facebook Live saying peace and good evening to the kings and queens. What's up, Queen? Thank you for joining. Oh man, it's raining out there in Texas. Lord, never mind. I don't want to be out there. Donna's out there in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. What's the weather like out there, sis? Hope all is well. Got a couple more minutes before we actually start the call this evening. So we just give everybody else some more time to join the call, as they'll be joining in slowly but surely. Shout out to Quavis. Hope I enunciated that correctly. Joining in on Facebook Live from NC. Who else we got joining the call? Looks like we got a couple more callers that just joined in on the call. Mention your name and where you from.
Hi, my name is Sebi, and I'm from Detroit, Michigan.
You said Sadia?
Yes, that's correct.
Welcome. Good evening. How you doing this evening, Sadia?
Good, how are you?
All is well. Just chopping it up with the family, saying hello, Ujambo to everybody. Anyone else that just happened to join the call that didn't get a chance to make themselves known? Who else we got on here?
Hey, this is Frank from Birmingham.
Brother Frank, what's good, King?
Hey, how's it going? On the road once again.
All is well, man. Thank you. I want to thank you and shout you out as well for, constantly joining in on the calls despite being on the road. We definitely appreciate your presence and your participation, brother.
No problem. Appreciate you guys for doing this.
All day. That's why we here, spreading black consciousness, man. Also got Assad on the Facebook Live. Peace, fam. Welcome back. Welcome back. Glad to see people are on Facebook Live and on the call. So it is approximately 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'll go ahead and begin and jump this call off. Again, my name is Brother Jawanzaa. I'll be your Sunday Sessions host for this evening, just like pretty much every other Sunday. And we host the Sunday Sessions, same time, same day, 7 o'clock p.m. to 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, just to, have roundtable dialogue and discussion about a lot of the issues and challenges that are facing our community and, deconstructing those challenges and talking about next steps forward, right? The call-in number is 404-448-2002. And so it'll be the same number and same day each week. And so before we get into the call, I just want to say, make sure you mute your phone for background noise if you're driving or you're in the presence of, might be in public, just so that people can hear you, hear the person that's speaking clearly. But also this is, like I said, a roundtable discussion, so definitely encourage feedback. So make sure you take your phone off mute before you make yourself known and contribute to the dialogue and conversation. And just mention your name before you speak so we know who's talking and we can address you. And also just keep in mind, family, we all come from diverse backgrounds. And so, we don't have to be unified in our beliefs to be unified in our intentions, right? So just make sure you're respectful of the person that's speaking. Don't interrupt. And we'll make sure everybody gets a chance to speak. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and kick off the build for this evening. Tonight, last month, to kind of give you a rundown, was, February, which is Black History Month. But, we focused on the relationship element of life. So we talked about quite a bit of things. We talked about, in regards to relationships, we talked about black love and black power, redefining that and what does that mean, right? We took that from there to integration, right? Is integrated relationships beneficial for, the black family and our advancement as a nation and as a race? And that went on to different types of relationships. So we talked about marriage. We talked about polygamy. And we talked about the benefits of those and if those are the proper and next steps forward. And if so, we also talked about the disadvantages and the cons of those as well. And overall, we just talked about for like-minded individuals that believe polygamy or polygamous relationships are beneficial for us going forward. So that's pretty much a rundown of what it was last month during February. But also keep in mind that Black History Month is every day, every month, every year. Black History 365. So we'll continue celebrating that as we go forward. This month, in the month of March, we'll be focusing on the political area of life and laws, right? So tonight we'll talk about, we'll deconstruct the 13th Amendment, the documentary as well that I'm sure a lot of you may or may not have heard about or seen, but I'm pretty sure a lot of you have seen that. We'll also talk about the Jim Crow laws, of the original Jim Crow laws and the new Jim Crow laws, more so known as mass incarceration for black people, not just men but women as well. right here in America, and then we'll also conclude with coming up with innovative ways and strategies as far as next steps forward. So can anyone pretty much tell me what is, or does anyone kind of want to build on what exactly the 13th Amendment is? The 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution. Can anyone shed light or throw a little bit of light on what that is, family?
Well, hi, my name is Hadia,
Mm-hmm.
and I can read it just so that anyone else who wants to can define it and go into the deeper meaning of it.
Floor is yours, sis. Go ahead.
It says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for a crime whereof a party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction.
Ashe, thank you for reading that. And when was that ratified for the most part? Do you know that off the top of your head, Queen?
Pardon? I'm sorry.
When was that law or that amendment ratified into the U.S. Constitution? Do you know about off the top of your head, Queen?
I believe it was 1789 is when it was written.
But it was ratified in 1865, correct?
Yes.
Correct. Right. So with that, with going off of that working definition, do you want to build a little bit on? I want to hear your thoughts on why does it negatively impact black people more than any other group of people in America? And you can answer that, Sadia, or anyone else in the family on the call can definitely answer. I want to hear your thoughts on, based upon the 13th Amendment of the United States Constitution, why does it negatively impact black people more than any other group of people here in America? What are your thoughts on that?
Hey, Jawanzaa, this is Dante. It negatively impacts the black community for several different reasons. It puts you right back into, if convicted of a crime, back into a situation where you no longer have any rights as a person. That's one way that it negatively impacts us. But the other way is that being that there's so many of us in the prison systems already, a lot of times even for nonviolent crimes or drugs, you name it, or none of the above. Sometimes we don't have to worry about doing anything. It could just be for the fact that we just jaywalk and we get arrested, and being that or we're poor, and then we end up in a situation where we no longer have our rights in the prison system. So we already have high numbers in there, probably I think it's like over 65% of our population is represented in the prison systems, and we only make up 13% of the overall population in America.
Mm-hmm.
So you have that, and then you have the fact that a lot of our men are in prison. So that probably plays a role in terms of our relationships with the opposite sex, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So these are different things that I'm just have been thinking about for a little bit.
One other thing, this is Phyllis in Memphis. Another thing that impacted us so greatly was not just the fact that they were going to jail, but it was the fact that they were getting free labor. Particular areas that had these different laws, they would they would make trumped up charges against our men and put them in prison just so that they could have free labor. So, in other words, it was another way to put them back into slavery.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Phyllis, and thank you for your contribution, you and Dante, and also to Sadia for defining what the 13th Amendment was. And I think that's where we should all start when it comes to having these conversations, because everyone's not necessarily on the same page, and maybe everyone hasn't seen that documentary of the 13th by Sister Ava DuVernay. I hope I said that correctly. And that's the whole purpose of having this conversation, right? And Sister Phyllis said that was just another way to basically keep slavery alive. And when you think about the context of when this amendment was ratified, it was in 1865. So slavery had just ended. And so essentially, like what Sister Phyllis was said, there was a lot of black people who were coming out of slavery that were going to be unemployed now, and they didn't know what to do with them. And so instead of, maybe creating more opportunity for them to have their own economy and have our own land and area, they figured out ways to keep us in involuntary servitude, which is the exact words that are mentioned in the 13th Amendment. It says basically neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have duly convicted. So essentially they created laws out of nowhere, out of the thin air, to make black people criminals, right? And so the 13th pretty much builds on that. I'm not sure how many of you have seen this documentary, but it said America has 5% of the population is black, but 25% of the world's prisoners, but we're 25%, oh, I'm sorry, America, it has 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prisoners. So how can we be land of the free when a quarter of the population is incarcerated, right? 2.3 million, I'm just reading some statistics from the documentary, is the highest rate of incarceration in the world, right? So it's 2.3 million people that are incarcerated right now. And then there were also documentaries talking about propaganda that also, encourage the 13th Amendment and making black people as criminals, such as the original Birth of a Nation film, right? And that symbolism, which was also birthed the KKK and other domestic terrorist organizations as well. So there's a time period that we'll kind of get into that we as black people had to pretty much fight for some sort of equality. And we're going to talk about that word in a little while. I'm going to read a couple comments from Facebook Live. Donna said the 13th was a great documentary. Montreal said another tactic to keep melanated people from climbing out of the barrel, and then manipulated our minds to keep each other from getting out that barrel, was his take on the creation of the 13th Amendment. So Dante mentioned about the high numbers of incarceration, especially with our brothers. And so what are your thoughts on, is there a correlation between mass incarceration of black people and the disadvantages in the educational and economic areas of life that we have experienced historically as a result of Jim Crow? What are your thoughts on that, fam? So basically the question that I posed was, do you all believe that there's some sort of correlation between the disadvantages that we face both in the educational and economic areas of life as a result of the Jim Crow laws of the past and mass incarceration? Do you all think there's a correlation between that, or basically the high rate of mass incarceration is because of our own doing?
Oh, yeah. This is Dante and Jawanzaa. There's definitely a correlation between the two. You look at any situation where anybody who's economically disadvantaged, look at the major cities, Philadelphia, look at, North New Jersey, even what's happening in D.C. and other areas. Anything that where people, predominantly a group of people are poor or disadvantaged, you're going to find out that they may not have access to those resources. So you touched on it involving education. So there's a thing known as the school-to-prison pipeline. Mm-hmm. So, we can talk a little bit more about that, but it's just the fact that you look at the situations where you may not have access to resources that breed probably, you look at crime, high crime rate, and then you put in a situation where you have, basically a police state, you want to call it that, and then you look at the numbers there, and also with the prison statistics. So, and you mentioned some good points, bro. But I also want to bring something up. So, between the Reconstruction era, and I'm gonna build on this timeline in a second. But between like the different eras, once we came out of slavery, once slavery was quote unquote abolished, and I'm using that very loosely because we still see with mass incarceration, slavery is still alive and well today. But from the Reconstruction era, the segregation era, all the way up to the Civil Rights era, right? Black people were poor, right? But in a lot of those eras and a lot of that time period, there was still a lot of unity, and that birthed a lot of creation. A lot of our
black inventors of the time came out of those eras when we were broke or poor, but the rate of incarceration wasn't that high. So based upon what you said, bro, if poverty and economic status is a correlation to mass incarceration or high levels of incarceration, why is it higher now than it was back, right out of slavery or in any of those other areas, especially during the Harlem Renaissance in that era as well? Do you want to respond to that, Dante?
So you're talking about this. Let me get your question correct. You're saying from the different eras, what the difference is between then and now, what the factors are?
Essentially, exactly. So, black people have been broke and poor even right out of slavery, even in the 1920s and the 30s and the 40s, and a lot of that time as well. But there was a lot of group economics going on as well. So why is it that it's higher now than it was either back then?
Oh, okay. Well, that's real simple. We look at I'm not going to say it's real simple, but rather we look at the fact that after the Reconstruction period and then after even the Civil Rights period, after we integrated, we got a seat at the table, so to speak, with with people that don't look like us. We somehow think that we are equal to them, but we don't. We didn't bring anything necessarily to that table, or we didn't build a table of our own, so to speak. And so, with that being said, we have a lot of people out here, especially amongst us. We play as individuals, so we don't recognize that we are a part of a team. So, someone that looks like you, that is your team member. So, in that sense, being that there's a lack of unity, that right there was involved in the thought process. Lack of unity, right there, is the problem. We don't recognize that the sister across the street is our sister. She might need our help. My parents used to tell me stories, back when they were growing up, that someone had some greens and then the other person had some cornbread and that person down the street might have had some ribs. They'll bring all that together and have a potluck. So that right there means that we're playing a very individualistic game, and that was not set up for us as a collective. It wasn't set up for us. We're already just 3 generations behind in terms of the economic wealth gap. So no matter how we try to play it, we're always going to be behind if we're not playing together as a team.
This is Phyllis, and I'm trying not to answer these questions and let people that haven't talked before answer. But the one thing that I understood during that time, we were uneducated. We didn't have anywhere to go. We had no job. The Jim Crow laws were putting us in jail left and right. Whatever few things we had or tried to get were destroyed, because of the Ku Klux Klan or or whatever oppression group was available. So the progression of us after that was really kind of stifled simply because of our lack of knowing what to do. We had Mr. Charlie to tell us what to do, and now we're out on our own, uneducated, no money, nowhere to go. The 40 acres and the mule, we're still waiting on that. So it's we'd have to understand the mindset of the people during that time, and they had I guess you would call it tent cities is the new phrase, would have been a modern phrase for it. So just the poverty alone and the imprisonment, it was a depressing time, and it was really hard for us to get started. We wasn't even thinking about a business. We were thinking about trying to survive where meal was coming from. So I just wanted to set that up about, how it was when they got out of there and how difficult it was for us, not them, to move forward. Thank you.
Ashe, thank you for your feedback. Does anyone else want to kind of add to the conversation? Looks like we have some more callers that joined since we started at 7, so definitely make yourself known. If you're on Facebook Live, feel free to respond to what you heard Dante or Phyllis mention. The question that we're currently on, we're talking about, is there a correlation between the disadvantages that we face as black people in, the educational and economical areas of life. Is there a correlation between those disadvantages and mass incarceration as a result of Jim Crow laws?
Hey, this is Frank in Birmingham. Just to chime in on that. So if you go back and look at when slavery ended, although slavery ended and we were quote unquote free, at the time we owned no resources, as many people said. So we weren't educated. We owned little to nothing at all. So okay, you have a lot of people who are just free on paper, but they have nothing. They own nothing. And you look at what's going on today, and it's essentially we're in the same boat. Take for instance education. We have I guess our community, we have relied on public education for far too long to educate our children, and of course we know they've been miseducating us. But then when we have a public education, I'll take the state of Alabama where I live, for example, where for years they've been cutting education budgets, and then which is taking money and the resources away from our children. But they're constantly building more prisons, and studies have shown that when people are more educated, the crime rate goes down. So why do you continuously take money away from education, yet build more prisons? That's very strategic and systematic. So, and I guess we haven't learned our lesson that, okay, we need to stop relying on public education and educate our own people, build our own schools. That's something that we should have been doing a long time ago. Of course, we kind of learned our lesson now from integration and, how that really didn't help us. At the time, it seemed like it was a better option. But in the long term, we see that it wasn't. So I guess that's one big thing as far as while we're still where we are today. We didn't own any resources, and we still own very little resources, and we're still relying on the education of someone else. So that's my 2 cents. I guess in addition, I think Asai can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I think he did a podcast with someone that did another documentary similar to this. It was called, I believe, Elementary Genocide. And I believe that can be found on YouTube as well. I watched that as well. So it kind of touches on the same thing.
Thank you for your feedback, Dante, and your contribution. Does anyone kind of want to build off of what Brother Dante was talking about? He brought some really good points in terms of modern-day slavery, right? How a lot of times, taking it back to 1865, where we were free on paper, but we didn't own anything, right? We didn't have an understanding or knowledge about where to go from there. And to this day, we're still going through the same things. How much we rely on public education, or how we allow our enemies to pretty much educate us and brainwash us in a lot of different areas of life. And studies, he also mentioned studies have shown where people are more educated, crime decreases. And but as a result, our government doesn't invest in education, but they invest in war and the prison industrial complex and facilities to mass incarcerate people. And as a result, we need to educate ourselves and have our own institutions. Does anyone else want to build on what Brother Frank just mentioned, or bring anything new to the table? Any new callers on the line? Anybody on Facebook Live?
This is Anisha in Nashville. I pretty much agree with everyone has said so far, but also wanted to add that how I feel nowadays prison is kind of modern-day slavery, but how they try to turn it back and make it seem like we did it to ourselves is kind of ironic. Like you guys said before, how the education system is set up to pretty much put a lot of black young men into prison and get them ready to be put in an area like that, because they've been trained like that their whole life. I mean, you go to school, it's like a factory line, and you raise your hand, you speak when you're told, you sit in the line, you eat what they tell you to eat, which is horrible food. I mean, the whole thing in general is just completely messed up. But then they make it seem like it was your choice have to survive, and you got to do what you can. I mean, there's been, students sent to juvenile for stealing food because they don't have anything to eat. Like you do what you can, you do what you have to do to survive. And so I think that they definitely know this, and it's just a way to put them into the prison system faster, quicker, so they can make money off of them for the long run.
Thank you, Anisha. And you mentioned some really good points, talking about how prison is modern-day slavery. And that's essentially what Sister Michelle Alexander's book is really all about, talking about the new Jim Crow. And, from the beginning of the call, we're pretty much transitioning into the second part of the call now. We deconstructed the 13th Amendment, and we've been talking about how Jim Crow laws have affected black people once we first got out of slavery, and the new Jim Crow of mass incarceration, and basically making up all different types of laws and coming up with more creative ways to mass incarcerate black people mostly, even though other minority groups, quote unquote, are also affected by these Jim Crow laws as well, but coming up with more creative ways to keep slavery alive, even though legally, according to the 13th Amendment, you can't do it unless that language is still in place, such as being convicted of a punishment or a crime. Sister Donna on Facebook Live said, after integration, we as blacks were assimilated into the system, and many of us became comfortable. That is why we don't have as many black-owned businesses as we did back then, because we were forced to rely on each other because we weren't accepted anywhere else. We are still part of a systematic racism. Look at the skin color of most persons in administration roles at our jobs. This is only one example. And I think she touched on a great point that I was going to eventually get to, because according to a lot of people on the call that I think we can mostly agree on, there is a direct correlation between lack of opportunities, lack of resources, lack of economics and education, and that pipeline to the prison industrial complex. However, it was understandable back in the latter part of the 19th century, early part of the 20th century as well. But once we became more educated, right, there still was a high rate of incarceration. Matter of fact, right now, there's the highest rate of incarceration now than any time in history. And so that's kind of what I was getting to. Why is it higher now than it was even once we first got out of slavery, right? Even once we were in that Reconstruction era. And I think Sister Donna mentioned a great point. Before integration, we were forced to practice group economics, that principle of Ujamaa, right? When it comes to Kwanzaa. Group economics, there was more unity because we didn't have a lot of resources and we just didn't know. But why is it that once we had and then another question I kind of want to pose, why was the push for integration so great by the NAACP and other organizations of that nature as opposed to having our own in sovereignty? But did anybody kind of want to answer that question first before I kind of go off on a rant? If I'm making sense.
What was the question?
Let me pose it like this. Why do black people still experience institutional racism despite having access to more resources and more education, right? So if there's a direct correlation between lack of education and economics, why are we still experiencing a high rate of incarceration and a high rate of institutional racism? Anybody want to answer that? That makes sense?
Well, this is Phyllis again. If anybody's gone through anybody's school system, we're lost. I mean, we don't know anything about ourselves once we come out of 12 years of so-called education. A lot of times we don't hear about any, and again, I have to tell my age, I'm in my 60s. When I was, the first time I heard about slavery, I was in the 7th grade. It was a paragraph. It had a black man with a chain around his neck, and a white man in a suit with a cigar hanging out of his mouth, holding the other end of the chain. So that was comical to us. We never realized that, that possibly could have been my uncle. I'm just throwing that out there. But the education system has really failed us in trying to educate us. And the reason why, and I know your original question was why was the NAACP and a lot of the black groups behind the integration movement.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know at the end that a lot of it was ignorant, and I'll put it to you that way.
Mm-hmm. We
thought this would be a better way to do it. I'm here in the South, in Memphis, so I know what the thoughts were.
Mm-hmm.
Our books were 6 years older than the books in the white community, and the only way that we thought at this time that that we could get equal rights is to be in the same classroom with them, because they sure as heck wasn't going to send those good books to our schools.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as time went on, we realized that was not a good decision. As time went on, we realized that it was another white supremacy trick in order to dismantle our groups, dismantle our people, dismantle our communities, and to spread us out again. So it was a trick. We were not aware of this. And of course, when you don't read history, and you don't know your history, you'll make the same mistakes over again. And that's basically what happened with the integration program. And many, many years after that, needless to say, we all realized that was really horrible. But at the time, that was the only option that was available to us if we wanted to get what we called a better education. Thank you.
Thank you for that wisdom. And that's what I love about the conference calls. We had people from different generations on the call, and there's different perspectives. So it's good when we can reach back and have someone on the call that actually lived through that era that can pretty much articulate why it went wrong and the reason why it did. Anyone else kind of want to build on what Sister Phyllis was just talking about? Or bring something new to the table?
This
Any
is
new thoughts?
Again, in Nashville. Again, I would have to agree with everything she said, and just going back to kind of knowing yourself and not trying to be like the oppressor. Anytime we try to educate ourselves to be more white or to do anything to be more like them, it's devaluing ourselves, and doing that is not going to help, bring us up and empower our community at all. We have to know our strength, know ourselves, know our history to be able to bring ourselves up out of this. And so, with that being said, going back into the community and uniting together and educating ourselves as a whole, building ourselves up, knowing that the high standard is not to be like the white man. It's to be like who we were originally supposed to be. And so once we start to educate ourselves more on that, it'll be a lot easier to see the value and to see how important it is to know about our history. So until we start educating ourselves on who we are and where we came from, I don't think that it's going to be possible for us to overcome that.
Thank you, Queen. Thank you for your feedback. Anyone else want to build on what either one of these sisters just mentioned or the topic at hand right now that hasn't had a chance to speak?
Yes, this is Dante. To touch on that, I do believe that, at least when I read, that the NAACP chose integration, and like the elder said, basically that we were tricked, but we wanted basically an equal allocation of the resources. You look anywhere in our textbooks, mainly it was always that struggle for resources or access to it. Like, for example, 40 acres and a mule. We never got that. So we figured, well, okay, let's just integrate into the system somehow, and maybe that'll give us access to resources. In some ways, for some, the individual, yes, they may have given some black folks access to certain things, but the overall structure in terms of group-wise collectivism, it didn't really do much for us. And then, like something that Dr. Claude Hanson mentioned, we were given the illusion of inclusion into the society. That's all we were given, post-integration.
So, in these different eras, the Reconstruction era, basically right after slavery ended, all the way up through the segregation era, which is like 1900 through 1939, even all the way up to the civil rights era, we did have our own institutions. We had HBCUs that were created. We did have some black schools. I don't know if the consensus on the call is that we didn't have any type of our own schools or anything like that. And then as soon as the Civil Rights or the Brown versus Board of Education was passed, we just up and started integrating. So we've always had our own institutions and our own businesses, right? We had we had Black Wall Street. We had multiple different periods of time in different parts of the country where we've had our thriving economies, even though they've been dismantled and torn down due to domestic terrorism and white supremacist organizations like KKK. Like, we have had some stability of our own institutions. We still do have HBCUs and some black-owned schools to this day. So those that have stood the test of time, have they failed us as well? What are your thoughts on that, fam?
Hey, this is Frank again. Just going back to, like you're saying, Reconstruction. I remember reading in the Miseducation of the Negro, the way that, public schools even came about, and even higher education was, through the collective efforts of, the black people and poor white people. But even at the time, our schools of higher education, even though we had them, they still were not preparing and teaching our people the things that we needed at the time. We were trying to, I guess, model our higher education institutions after traditional white institutions that were, they were doing things for them. And we thought, okay, if we do something, exactly what they're doing, we're going to be in the same position, and it's going to help us, when in actuality, we weren't teaching our people at the time what we needed to teach our people, because we were still behind the 8 ball, and we were trying to play catch-up. Mm-hmm. And even today, we're still trying to play catch-up. We do have the HBCUs, which, I graduated from. But even when I look at it today, of course, the person that sits at the top of a HBCU is, the president. It's the governor of each state. So I'll talk about, state of Alabama again, for example. Of course, this is, a state that's way, way behind, not very progressive. So, our HBCU, do we, us as a people, do we really run them? No. Everything that, goes on is, okay, the governor has the last say-so, or, who's going to be on the board of trustees. So they're still even controlling those, for example, and, they're not, funding those HBCUs with the funding that traditionally white institutions, they're not giving them the same type of funding as well. So even on that high level now, in 2017, the white man is still controlling what we thought and what we created for us. Wow. Which is still, an issue.
Great thoughts, bro. Frank, you raised some really thought-provoking things. Anyone kind of want to build off of what Frank said, question what he said, agree, disagree, that hasn't had a chance to speak? Want to add anything more to what Brother Frank just said? My sis, we can't hear you too well. Hold on a second. Make sure you turn the volume up on your phone. We can't hear you too well.
They're in charge of the schools, and that's a failure on us too, because we're not, sitting on the boards of these HBCUs. There's enough businessmen and educated black people and rich black people, or whoever needs to be on these boards, so it's just not all of a sudden government control. I see it as kind of a failure on our part, because we all know we have the money and the resources. So what are we not doing? We're letting our schools fall apart that were created for us, by us. We should not be running to get to those other universities, because when you're at those other white universities, they don't care about you. When I hear that students who graduate from HBCUs, they usually have more success than students who graduate from white universities. Thank you.
And that was from...
One of the things, hi, this is peace, everyone. This is Sandra speaking. One of the things I think that many of us are confused about is that black people did not start HBCUs. So, for example, Hampton was created by one of the Confederate, I can't remember his name. He was a captain or something or another. I went to the University of St. Augustine. That was created by the Episcopal Church. Shaw was created by the White Baptists. I mean, it's a lot of Howard was created by one of the white warmongers or whatever. Anyway, it's an illusion that was created because we didn't have the money to start any institution. And these institutions normally, before they even became colleges or universities, they were started as a way of educating through vocational. So even when it comes to Tuskegee, and all of these colleges were started by some whites. So we all have to be clear about the history when we start talking about us starting something. And when we start thinking about us collectively having trillions of dollars, I don't see us contributing back to us having more of us. I continue to see the $3 trillion that has been spent last year will continue to be used as a consumer and not contributing back to us. So, and I started thinking about this last week. Okay, so since Trump met with all the presidents of the HBCUs last week, what that indicated to me is, okay, we have to work within the system. I have to still consider to apply for grants. I have to still consider to how am I going to be able to utilize the monies within the system, because this system is something that we still have to work within. I work in this system. I don't work for Caucasians, but I work within the system. And so I look at it from a different perspective. These are monies that is due to us, regardless of how we get it. We have to figure out a way of how we're going to come together and get money collectively for those people who don't have the resources to be able to send their child to an African-centered school. To be able to take their child out of public school and say, or a child walk down the street and say, oh, man, I would love to go to this school. And I said, sorry, it's $1,800 to come here. So there the child is kicked out of that, being able to have a higher level of education and know who he is. Now we're going to send him back to public school where he's going to drop out, and then he's going to become a criminal because he's bored, because nobody's taking the time to teach. I mean, we just have to look at things in a more successful way, because I don't see half of the 40 million black people, and I'm just throwing that number out here, giving up their money. I don't even see 20 million doing that.
Well, thank you for that, sis.
We might get 10,000.
And you
and I'm just joking. I'm more, I'm just, just trying to be a little, but that's just how our people have been so conditioned. So, but thank you for the time.
No, thank you for your feedback, sis. And you raised some great points as well. And, I mean, I think what we all can kind of get from what Sandra just said, and you all can kind of agree or disagree, that many of us are confused that we created these HBCUs and that we control them. And it kind of goes back to what Frank was talking about, the illusion of control of our own institutions, because once you get into the finances and the budget sheet and go into the boardrooms and those conversations, a lot of times we're being supported by the government or other white supremacist organizations and things of that nature that have an alternative agenda to what we're striving for. So how can we really say that we have our own when it looks that way? And that's the way it's set up, right? So I think for the most part, we have about 15 more minutes left. And so the last part of this call, I want to start talking about solutions and innovation, right? So for the most part, we deconstructed the 13th Amendment, why it was created, when it was created, and why it negatively impacts black people more than any other group here in America. And we also talked about the Jim Crow laws. And I don't know if we really got into the definition of it, and I'll kind of breeze through it really, but basically these were laws that were created that was basically were created segregation between black people and white people in the areas of education, economics, other social disadvantages such as restaurants that we could go to, bank lending institutions, also job discrimination and voting discrimination. So pretty much discrimination in any area that you can think of. And this existed, Jim Crow laws existed from pretty much 1865 all the way up until pretty much 1954, 1964 during the Civil Rights era and the Brown versus Board of Education. But even with that, the new Jim Crow laws were created, would pretty much criminalize every type of behavior that black people could engage in because there's a direct correlation between criminal activity and lack of education and economic resources, which has a direct correlation to the mass incarceration. But even with that, having our own businesses in the 1920s and having having integration to have more access to resources with the Civil Rights era, we still seem to experience a lot of institutional racism, a lot of mass incarceration, even war, black people being killed from police officers. So even with all the integration and things that we've done, we're still in the same type of slavery that we were experiencing in the 1800s, right? So I think what we need to talk about now, and we even talked a little bit about how a lot of our own institutions have pretty much failed us to a degree, right? So, and we talked about, how integration was a trial and error type of experimentation. We thought that it would be the next step forward, even though we've had our own businesses and institutions to a degree, but maybe integrating might give us more access. And even with that, it's still been an illusion at the end of the day. So, my question that I pose to you all is sovereignty a better alternative? Is that the next step forward? Or is segregation, what we had before, was that better for us to some degree? Separate but equal, right? If so, what are the next steps forward, fam, in achieving that?
This is Phyllis in Memphis. Segregation is probably the best cure for us. Right here in Memphis, we got a neighborhood that's a little depressed. You could probably buy a whole street for less than $10,000, houses included. They're just that cheap, $50. I think they're $100 a lot, $500 a lot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in my mind, I was thinking, I said, what if every black person that had those huge homes that they're paying $2,000 and $3,000 a month just for a house payment would just move back into the black community, buy one of those, they could sell those mansions that they have and buy maybe 2 or 3 of those houses that are in the black area, renovate them, and maybe sell them to families that are, at a reasonable price, not what would have happened if the white people go in there and do it, because they've done that in several communities. As I said many times on our conference calls, that we're down to one black community. If you lose that, that's going to be it for us. There would be no black community. You'll have to, again, that's all a part of white supremacy, the illusion. Mm-hmm. So if we were to all move back into black neighborhoods, if we all just take it back to where we used to have it, I think we could probably solve a lot of our problems. We could regulate, we could build, regulate, teach in our own schools to do. We could encourage people to put gardens in their backyard instead of ornaments and stuff. make your backyard into a garden, and maybe 4 or 5 of them on the neighborhood have gardens in the backyard, and then sell them at the neighborhood grocery at the end of the street. There's so much we could do if we could get together as a person, but it's not nothing we can do, but it's difficult when you got one on one street, one on another street, and one on the other. Just like this conference call. I noticed that we're calling from all over the United States. If we were all trying to get together, it would be very difficult. But if you were right across the street from me, if you were right down the street from me, if you were right next door to me, I could help you. I could help you a whole lot better. So to me, the solution is, let's go back to our tribal nature. Let's go back to our community nature. Let's go back to our community. Let's make communities. Let's find an area where we can all move in together. We can either be predominantly black or buy an island. You can buy an island now for $200,000. I've been looking. You can buy an island, and a lot of people can live on the island and bring that community back. But it's difficult, and the white man knows that. That's why he's stretched this out like this. We can't do anything apart. We can do a lot as a privilege. Thank you.
Yo, this is Justin from Baltimore real quick. I was just thinking, for everything to, change, unless we have, some major cataclysmic event, people are too set in their ways now. First, you have too many separations of groups. It's even if you unify and do buy an island, or you unify and do buy a compound, they've still been, contorted to make it seem like it's, one big cult or something. And people don't like cults, So it's first you got to change people's mindsets about everything. Or you got to bring them together. And the biggest thing to bring people together is, a natural, what's sad to say, it's a natural disaster to me. So, I don't know. Maybe I don't want to be morbid. I'm sorry. I was just thinking out loud.
Nah, thank you for your honesty, brother, Justin.
This is Dante.
Hold on, Dante. We love hearing from you, bro, but we got over 20 callers on the line, so we only got about 9 more minutes left. And I want to make sure everyone who hasn't had a chance to speak, at least he gets to say their piece. So thank you, brother, for your contribution. But I just want to make sure everyone else had a chance to speak before you go back, before you build. Anyone else? It looks like we got some callers from the 614 on the line. That's my hometown, Columbus, Ohio. Got some callers from Jersey, Texas. Anyone else kind of want to build before in these last 10 minutes or so on what are the next steps forward? I mean, we've pretty much deconstructed that integration is a no-go, right? It is not beneficial for the advancement and the representation of black people, not only in this country, but also in the diaspora. So, is separation, right, segregation or sovereignty the next step forward for us? And if so, how do we achieve that? On Facebook Live, Donna, kind of I'm backtracking a little bit, but I also wanted to act like I didn't want to, leave out my people on Facebook Live. But she said that it's the law of the land, family. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, look at who makes the laws. Every time we think we are advancing, these jokers always find ways to keep us down, to stifle our advancement. As a public school teacher, I've witnessed how these people label our children at an early age, especially our black males. They start out early and they put them in resource classes. They don't offer them advanced placement courses in high schools. I could go on, but it infuriates me that they do not care about our kids. And I don't expect anything more because I know the truth. But in regards to the question I just asked, she said that we have to move forward with those that are down with the cause. Some will be left behind, but that's a fact. And that's absolute, sis. And as I mentioned earlier, we got pretty much over 25 people on the call. And that's pretty much what United Black America is all about. Connecting these like-minded individuals so we can move forward. And that's what we're doing with the Sunday Sessions cause, spreading this black consciousness, right? Deconstructing these challenges that we're facing. And we start at the root and the cause of these challenges, which 99.9% of the time is white supremacy. And then we go forward from there. We talked about our own accountability and our own challenges, right, with our own HBCU institutions, with our own decision making, with our communities and our relationships with male and females and with each other. And then we talk about innovative ways to move forward. And, my opinion is that we definitely need to separate from integration, right? I know a lot of people have benefited from integration and, working in the dominant white society. But overall, when we look at the black community and the diaspora, we aren't really benefiting from it. And the only way forward is to live with one another, amongst one another, and resolve our own problems. But anytime we have presidents from HBCUs running over to the White House and for a photo op, because at the end of the day, Donald Trump curved them. There was no type of conversation talking about a plan of action and what he had in mind for HBCUs. He took a picture, and then at the end of the day, he canceled the meeting. So they went back to their universities with no answers. And students at Howard are doing graffiti on buildings and holding their president accountable, as they should, because they didn't have enough courage to say, you know what, we need to demand more from our alums to give back, and allow these celebrities that come to our institutions for homecoming and demand that they give back as well. And that's really what the next steps forward are, fam. Practicing group economics and that principle of Ujamaa, living amongst each other, and that might even be a topic for another call. What areas of the country do black people need to consider in terms of relocation? Because right now, this last decade, 2010 through 2020, is basically the centennial of the Great Migration, right? So, what was it, 1910 through 1920, a lot of black people were moving from the South up to the North, right? Because they were just tired of racism. They were tired of being lynched. And the racism in the North was much more liberal and conservative and not so much in your face, even though they still experienced a lot of that. And I think now a lot of people are waking up, and because of the cost of living in cities like New York and D.C. and Philly, a lot of people are doing that reverse migration. Even in California, the black neighborhoods of Oakland and L.A. are starting to become gentrified, and people are moving further and further east and south. So, I think this was a really good build, fam, and I think we all have deconstructed, reconstructed, and come up with some innovative ways to talk about next step forward. We got about 4 or 5 minutes left on the call, though. Anybody else have any closing thoughts on what we discussed this evening that hasn't had a chance to speak? I love everybody that's contributed. I love y'all so much. Y'all contribute some really good talking points, but anyone that hasn't had a chance to speak, have any closing thoughts? Make sure you take your phone off mute. Definitely want to hear from you. Even if you're on Facebook Live, if you haven't had a chance to say your piece, want to give you that opportunity. So that's what's up, fam. So with that being said, I just want to thank everybody for taking time, 60 minutes out of your evening and out of your week to build with like-minded individuals and the United Black America organization. You could be doing anything else with your time in your evenings, but you decided to log in and build with us and talk about and be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem, and that's where it starts, fam. I want to give a shout out to everybody that's on the call that we actually heard from. Dante, Phyllis, Justin, Sherman, Sadia, Frank, Anisha, Niali, Sandra, and anyone else that had a chance to join on the call but had their phone on mute due to whatever circumstance it was. One other thing I want to say in regards to resources, things that I recommend to lost or like-minded individuals and family members that resolve or provide further insight on this subject. The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. Definitely get that scroll, read through that, share that with your cipher. The 13th documentary, that's on Netflix. If you don't have it, get somebody with a password and credentials so you can watch that, or buy it, even better, so we can practice group economics. So those documentaries and those scrolls definitely shed a little bit more light on the 13th Amendment, the New Jim Crow, and next steps forward. And also want to thank everybody on Facebook Live, Montrell, Donna, Dante, Assad. Thank you for joining on Facebook Live and including your thoughts. Quavis, thank you for building with us. But also, I just want to also say, the mission of United Black America, number one, is to spread black consciousness, which is what we're doing and what we're going to continue doing every Sunday. fight white supremacy and establish a United States of Africa. And we have three simple tenets. Do no harm to your people, help your people while they're in their times of need, and hold the line, family. And that's exactly what everybody on this call and on Facebook Live is doing. Shout out to Hadia, hope I said that right. Power, unity, and royalty, my sister. And, if you enjoy these calls and you want to continue to be part of the solution and you agree with what we're talking about tonight, I invite you all to join the movement if you haven't already. UnitedBlackAmerica.org is the website. Learn a little bit more about our mission, our tenets. Join a work study course, 8 weeks. Develop your knowledge of self. And also follow us on Twitter, Pan-African Unity. On Instagram, The Real UBA. And also on YouTube, United Black America. Follow the channel. We'll have all the Sunday sessions on there, in addition to all of our other projects on there as well. The Kwanzaa project that we did was a lot of fun. Enjoyed doing that. And also on Slack, hop in the Sunday Sessions channel. Give us some feedback, whether you like the call, dislike the call, future subjects that you love to hear from. But with that being said, it's 8 o'clock p.m. on the dot. I want to say thank you, fam. Enjoy your evening and your week, and I'll catch y'all next Sunday. Peace.
Peace. Peace.
Peace.
Nakupenda. Love y'all, fam.
Peace.
Peace.
Peace out, y'all. Love y'all. Facebook Live, always a pleasure building with y'all, seeing and speaking with y'all. So much fun. I greatly appreciate it. I see Rob on the line still. Too bad I didn't hear from you, bro. Love you, man. Hope all is well. Shout out to Little Rock, Arkansas. Y'all have a good evening. So that concludes our call tonight. I just hung up with the Sunday Sessions fam on the actual call. And so now it's time to conclude the Facebook Live. Catch y'all next Sunday. Peace, Muhammad.